Ladies, this is what happens when you leave an adult child unsupervised for 5 days. Hey Google, activate command center.
Dusty, you are now online. Time to kick.
I present to you the command center. So as cool visually as this is just the facade. It's a byproduct of something much greater. The minute I heard my wife was gonna be out of town for 5 days, one thought entered my mind. Build a secret lair, a secret room. So all this was a distraction to serve one purpose: misdirection. To prevent my wife from coming home and seeing what was right behind that wall. So to really appreciate everything that went into this, we're gonna have to go back 5 days to see where it started. Hey Google, deactivate command center.
Deactivated your greatness.
Deactivated indeed. Today I'm building a secret room. So I'm gonna build this in stages. Stage 1 will be building the frame. Boom. Then I'm gonna put in a two-way mirror so that I can see you, but you can't see me. Have the secret door entrance here, and to distract away from the seam of the door, lights. The first thing your eye is going to be drawn to is that light. The next step, put in the drywall, cut out the seam of the door, cut out the shape of the lights. Now that the drywall is done, it's time to move into the painting. Then after we paint it, put up the toy shelves, install the cases, add in more mood lighting. So the philosophy I've had for secret rooms recently is this. If a man doesn't have a secret room, I can tell you something about that man. They have been broken. How many forts did you build as a kid? How many pillow forts? How many tree houses? When did you give up on that? The good news is I can help fix you. And all you need is the simple application of one secret room in your life. Let my own build login journey be a step-by-step instructions of how to introduce a little bit of your childhood back to your life. Full disclosure on this project, I've actually never built a false wall or done any framing before. All my references come entirely from YouTube videos. Some of the videos say to cut out the flooring, the side panels, to pull them away, but I don't want to do that.
To pull off this operation, it's going to be essential that I become a master of time, because I have so little of it to work with. For every task that I perform, I have to ask myself, what is going to be the quickest way to do this while still making it look absolutely fantastic? When it came to the molding, I wanted to remove the bare minimum amount and keep as much of the existing molding in place as possible, which actually turned out to be a task that was easier said than done, solely because I lacked the correct tool, which would have been an oscillating saw. And that's kind of the fun side of doing these projects, is that you eventually build up the tools that you need. My mounting frustration culminated with me just removing this molding altogether, and with the simple breaking of the molding, my journey is christened. This destructive act signals the march forward and the point of no return. On to the next step, constructing a frame for the wall. Keeping in mind that my goal is to make this wall perfectly seamless, the only way that will come into fruition is if the frame makes contact with the cold concrete floor. In a display of strength, I rip apart the carpet and I make short work of it.
Anyway, so what I'm gonna do right now is drill and anchor this in.
This wall must stand up firmly against the onslaught of those that would try to discover the secrets that lie within. Warning, before drilling, be aware that your floor could be booby-trapped with electrical lines or water lines, and you don't want to drill through either of them. Simply drill a hole, remove the excess debris created from drilling into concrete. Simply screw the anchor in place. Now the frame is secured.
Anchored in place. Make sure it's level. Secure it to the wall. And then put one across and start framing it up that way.
As I'm putting the 2x4s in place, a shiver goes up my spine as I'm struck by the realization I miscalculated the amount of 2x4s I would need. This is one of those rare lumber oversights that can't easily be corrected. I don't have the option or the luxury of getting more wood, simply because it would disrupt my very limited timetable to complete this, and my wife coming home prior to the construction of the room, which in turn would risk exposing my secret room, or worse, risk endangering my freedom, because if my wife comes home to a mess in a half-constructed secret room, I will never be left home alone again. So I simply have to make the best use of the lumber that I have. I'm going to be generous with the spacing between each stud, allowing a variation of 16 inches or more. So as you can see, I got most of the frame done. So I'm about ready to do the doorway. What I got to do that is a Saws hinge, S-O-S-S. This hinge is what it's going to allow us to make a flush doorway. A Saws template to cut out a hole for the Saws hinge. I have two 2x4s of equal measurement. The reason I have two 2x4s of equal measurement is because I'm going to put the template at the top and at the bottom. It should kind of ensure that I'm getting the exact measurements I need. The mathematics behind the measurements are quite simple. If you're given two pieces of wood of equal length, single template, if that template is applied to the same location on each piece of wood, the alignment will be symmetrical. And despite reducing the chance for error, I introduced much error by not calculating the depth in which the rotor would cut, due to the fact that this was my first time using the rotor. I was so eager to just jump in and start cutting, I didn't stop to think about the depth at which I should be cutting, or that I would need a symmetrical depth on each piece of wood. And because there is a discrepancy in the depth between the hinges, they're a little stiff on opening and closing, but not to a degree that it's going to cause any issue with the project at hand. Why am I standing in the dark, you might ask? That's a very good question. Because there's lights. Alright, so last night I painted these to form the boxes for the LED lights. So I wanted the lights to be a lot more permanent than just a loose set of strips. So I ended up making light boxes out of plywood and acrylic. Part of how I'm going to ensure that the secret door entrance stays secret is by building up layers of misdirection, and one of these layers will include the lights. So I wanted to do something in the vein of like the gaming rooms that use a lot of LED lights, but I also wanted to do something that stood out, so I thought having the lights built into the wall is one way to do that. It can react to sound and yes, so I've created these here not for lighting of the room, but for more of an accentuation in the wall. I wanted something that was going to take people's eyes away from the seam to the door, which will be right here. They're instead going to be drawn to the light immediately. So I'm just going to kind of like spool it as I go. This is actually pretty awesome. The reason I have them on as I go is to, if for some reason I short them out, I'll know about it right away. Once the boxes were built, painted white for reflective purposes, I lined them with LED strips. I mean, it's not too much more complicated than that. And it's made even easier because all these strips have the adhesive already built into the strips. So you just pull and stick. Timers. It goes to the beat. Kamehameha. Boo, boo, boo. Oh. Yeah.
That sound activation is actually pretty cool.
The tool that I believed was best for cutting acrylic failed me. So what I ended up doing was improvising. Using a rotor tool that's primarily used for cutting through drywall. And because of the excessive debris that was flying up, vacuuming it as I go. And to secure my lungs and protect my airways, I whipped out my Bane mask. And I cut away and I shaped the acrylic the best I could. Which turned out to be not good at all. So I had to drill holes first in this, because if you tried to drill the screws in right away, it would shatter the acrylic. Also, if you screw them in too tight, it'll shatter the acrylic. So it's a very delicate process. Here you can see it's clamped in. What I'm doing is using wood glue just to secure them even more to the side here.
Right here I've installed the SOS hinge as well. So the door, I'm gonna put up like another frame up here, and it's not overly heavy, it's lighter than a normal door. First I wanna make sure that this is secured shut, so I hook this on there. So these clamps, my friends, these clamps were a last minute purchase, and they've been crucial to like this do-it-yourself project. And also I'd like to say, if you have a dream of hiding from your wife, don't let anything stop you.
There's an interesting phenomenon occurring. As I'm doing this project, I'm growing, I'm adapting. Even though my body's tiring, even though I'm going without sleep, I'm starting to think 10 moves ahead. I'm starting to develop like this ultra instinct for building secret rooms. For example, when I go to hang the door, I immediately know that I'm going to have a limited amount of strength to hold the door even. So I have to have the screw pre-drilled. I have to have the drill within arm's length. I fully understand and anticipate the window in which I need to work. I'm ready to move on to the two-way mirror. Now, two-way mirrors in themselves are expensive, so I found a cheap do-it-yourself alternative. Yeah. Now I'm doing the two-way mirror. So I just took an old picture frame that I had laying around, and I got this stuff online, which is like a mirror tent. And then in the wood, where it's gonna go, I trimmed out like a groove to put it in. I'm just gonna super load it with wood glue, hold it in place, and let it dry. And that turned out about as well as you can expect for someone that has only used a rotor twice. So then I just cut out the corresponding shape of the tinting, spray the glass in the tinting with water, stick the tinting to the glass, use a squeegee to smooth out all the air bubbles.
Thank you, Dusty. I'm just admiring myself in this mirror. This two-way mirror.
It's looking pretty good, I think. I still need to clean it now, but you can see that it looks pretty awesome. And we can spy out the back. Excited that that's done, but beyond exhausted right now. I don't know if you can tell, I'm like really tired. It's 3 in the morning right now. I've learned that you should wear shoes in a construction site because my feet are now covered. Like I have so many like splinters in my feet. Oh, I also ran out of wood. So one of the issues is I ran out of wood yesterday. So I've basically been using whatever I can find around the house. This is one of the pieces of wood that I had to actually like salvage.
So as you can see, it's a challenge to cut it because my miter saw, which I bought specifically for this project, is only wide enough to cut 2x4s. So I have to improvise in cutting it. The lack of wood, the improper tool are all symptoms of not having time on my side and, well, poor measurement.
And I got splinters in all my hands and feet. And I got sawdust all over my nose. My nose is completely clogged with sawdust.
So I guess what I'm getting at with that little public announcement is make sure you buy masks. Proper ventilation is going to be crucial.
Original designs. All right, so everything's cleaned up right now. So I can bring in the drywall, put it right here, and start screwing it into place. I got all the tools I need on this side of it, I hope.
For me, the drywall is like this personal mental victory hurdle that I got over. Whenever I heard the term drywall in the past, I always like steered away from it because I didn't know what was involved with hanging it. But it's literally the simplest part of this whole project.
A little bit of space. But ultimately not too bad at all, gentlemen.
I should say putting in the bottom one was the simplest part of the project.
Retrospect, I probably should remove these stupid carpet before putting it down here. Oh, it's coming together.
I I think it's worth noting that I used the drywall screws to connect the drywall directly to the door. I did that because I wanted to have a coherent wall from the get-go before I cut out the frame of the door. It was absolutely essential that I carve out the frame of the door while the door frame is still visible. If I were to hang that second piece of drywall and I didn't sketch out the bottom half of the light, it would be a horrible guessing game about where those lights were. So I marked out the other side of the door earlier. So this part of cutting out the door was the ultimate test of will and patience. Despite knowing that I needed to cut smoothly, cleanly, and sharply, every other impulse and urge in my body was just egging me on to force the door open prematurely.
Secret door! Secret door! Secret door! Secret door! This is a big boy achievement! Unlock! Secret door!
My next task is to cut out a slot for the lights. So to find the light, I create a room of darkness, knowing behind this wall is a source of light that will guide my box cutter clear and true as I cut out the pattern and I dig away the drywall slowly and surely. As the drywall thins, it begins to radiate, to glow, and I'm reaching through the drywall. So now I know my step forward must be tedious, it must be controlled. If I were to make a single mistake, it would scratch the glass, possibly break it, damage it in a way that would result in hours and hours of work that I cannot afford if I'm to meet the deadline of having this done before my wife gets here.
The drywall is up. The process was a lot more extensive than I initially thought it would be. I had to put up the drywall, blend the seams together, blend the seams against the wall and the ceiling. I had to carve out the space around the lights. There was a lot of detail put into sanding it, getting a nice even straight line, consistent shape and feel. A constant process of smoothing, sanding, reputtying. The door was another thing that when it was initially cut was extremely rough, so I had to smooth out the edges, kind of box them off more, and try to even out the space between this wall and the door itself. And I put in the hinge to the secret doorway. But I'm ready to move on to the next stage, which is painting. To hide the secret door, I'm coming up with like an interesting paint style where I'm gonna have like kind of turquoise circuitry going up the wall and disguising it. So the idea is the lights are a distraction point, the circuitry is a distraction point, the toys are a distraction point. So hopefully when somebody comes in, their eyes are pulled away from the door and just the overall mise-en-scène of the wall. So we're gonna move on to stage, whatever it is now, and start the painting.
First I painted the base, which was just painting the wall. The piece de resistance, the thing that was really gonna set this apart was the circuitry. So my first stab at making the circuitry was simply outlining everything with frog tape and then painting it teal. I did this with the expectation that the frog tape, aka painter's tape, would create solid, straight lines. But once I started to pull away the tape, I found that the teal paint bled under the tape. My next idea was to freehand color in the dark blue line. That did not work. What worked the best was taking the drywall putty knife and using that to create straight lines. In between the freehand attempt and the putty knife was a series of templates I tried to build that just resulted in a waste of time and more disaster. Not even worth documenting, just mentioning.
I chose to use the dark blue because, as you can see, it helps aid in hiding the door.
So within the room, I want the lighting source to come from a series of independent controlled LEDs or smart lights to obviously the wall light that's already been constructed. I want LED lights in the corner, and then I want to replace the recessed lighting toy shelves with LED lights inside of them, colored LED lights that can change. Once all of that's done, I'm going to wire everything into my Google Home and give a series of commands or a series of scenes that my Google Home responds to.
These lights can change colors. These lights can change colors. And it's beautiful at night.
After hours of intense work, we got it painted, we got it decorated, we have it camouflaged. Now it's time to put it to the test. My wife is rapidly approaching. Less than an hour before she gets here. Will the secret room hold up? Will this be a big enough distraction to keep my room hidden? Will I clean up the mess before she gets here? Will she be thrilled with everything I've done? These are all exciting questions that will be answered in the next episode of Tracksuit Dusty. With my wife rapidly approaching, I'm about ready to put the secret room to the test. But that's a video for another day. If you made it this far, if you've enjoyed the journey, if you want to